Hi, this is the first in a two-part uh, video demonstration of going from View or Rhino, or sorry, SketchUp or Rhino to View. So I'm going to start with SketchUp. The second video will show how to bring a file exported from SketchUp or Rhino into View and kind of run through the basics of changing materials, adding vegetation, individual plants, ecosystems to surfaces, and we'll look a little bit at how you organize the file in View and see what kind of organizational structure comes through from SketchUp or from Rhino, depending on the file format that you export it as. So since SketchUp actually has a plugin that Eon Software makes for exporting a SketchUp file to View, we're going to start there, and then we'll take a quick look at Rhino, which we will use the 3DS or 3D Studio format as a means to export geometry from there to bring into View to populate it with plants and ecosystems. Okay, so in SketchUp, basically for SketchUp or Rhino, there are some basic rules you need to follow, and it's pretty much the rules that you would follow to do any type of modeling in either program that's efficient and economical and effective and isn't going to cause problems within the modeling program itself. Again, whether you model in SketchUp or Rhino doesn't matter. SketchUp actually does have a little better translation process because it takes the materials through and gives them names, although the materials come through in Rhino as well. But it's a little more automated. View understands a little bit more about the model because it has its own plugin to do that. But I'll just spend a couple minutes taking a look at this. Then the export process is very simple. I'll point out a couple other features which I'm not going to deal with right now, but maybe I'll come back to in a later video. So the first thing about modeling is use simple and efficient geometry. That's the best thing. Try and avoid any overlapping surfaces. You really don't want those. That gets to be confusing in View, and it's not really the right way to do it in SketchUp either. So make sure that when you click on a surface, it's just a single surface. There's no, as you move around, if you see that kind of shimmering between on the material, that usually means there's two surfaces occupying the exact same place or the same plane in SketchUp, which is not good. The other thing you want to do is use groups and components consistently. Like here, I have a couple quick little buildings. This one's got some windows, so that's a group. That's a group. This water is a group here. Now when I get down to here, it's just a surface. That's just a surface. What distinguishes those from each other also in View, you'll see that when we import this into View, it actually just refers to this as SU geometry because it's not grouped and it doesn't have a name. If you look at this building, it doesn't have a name right here. This one is called Building 1, so let's select this. We'll call that Building 2. And this isn't necessary, but it's just a lot easier because as you'll see, once we get into View, View has a world browser that lists all the objects that are in there, and we can also look through the materials and so forth. So it's a little easier when you name things, because if you want to reorganize that or switch things into layers in View, that just makes it easier to find. So grouping is important. This has a subgroup, so the windows in here, well, actually those aren't, but I think these are. Okay, so these aren't groups, so let's make a group out of some of these and just see how that works. And then we'll have both situations. So I'm going to go through here, select these individual windows. Oh, actually, I don't think I can do that in here. Let's try this. When it comes to these, ideally, if this was just regular geometry, this would be a good idea to group. But if I make this group, you can see that the openings disappear. Since they're components that actually cut through the surface, because it's a window and it allows you to see through there, I can't really group those. And you'll see how that comes through into View. All right, so let's get out here. Also, if you notice, I have a section in here. If I turn that on, you can see there's no extra geometry inside these buildings. So if you have extra planes or extra lines or it's broken down, you want to get rid of that. Also, in particular, when you're dealing with water surfaces, you want to make sure that you have a water surface. I go inside here, so that's actually grouped together, and you have a bottom of the water surface, whether it's a man-made pool or fountain, or whether you're representing the ocean or a river, you still need to have a river bottom, because when View renders water, it needs to know what's underneath, because the light actually penetrates the water, hits the bottom, bounces back up, and that's how View decides how to render it. It's not just an image of water that's placed on the surface. So make sure if you're creating structures like that that you have that. View can handle two-sided surfaces. You can see these walls don't actually have any thickness. But if you have something that you need thickness, you just want to add that in there to make sure that it works that way in View. You know, if you're applying brick, what that means is, you know, the brick goes right across the surface. Probably we would want to make a offset here and then maybe change the material, put some kind of coping on here. But again, it depends on what you're doing with the geometry. If this is a background building, or if you're always going to look at it from eye level and you're never going to see the top, then don't bother putting the detail in. Okay, so simple geometry, no overlapping surfaces, consistent use of groups and naming of groups. One of the things, View does have layers, as I mentioned, and I actually put a layer for windows in here, but as you'll see when I bring this into View, that layer doesn't come through. So both in SketchUp and in Rhino, you may want to organize things with layers for your own internal use, but it really doesn't make any difference. Groups are what's important, particularly in SketchUp. All the groups will come through and the geometry will be organized that way. So that's generally the way we've taught it in 251, that you really use the groups and the outliner to organize your model and not worry about layers so much. And that's certainly the case if we're bringing it into View. So don't worry about layers, but do be consistent with groups. This one doesn't have terrain, but if it did, you would want to drape all the surfaces on here. So what I have here is a little ground cover area, and maybe I can add another one across here. So anything that you can add in, and let's make it a different color. So this is the other thing you want to keep in mind, is that you really do want to be very consistent with some other vegetation here. You want to be consistent with materials. So one of the things we can do in View is add ecosystems based on a material, which is super powerful. We can actually add 3D objects to cover the surface without having to place them individually. Just tell it to fill this area up. I want this size, this quantity, this mix, and it does it. But you do need to have unique materials. If you use a basic color for the edge of the pool and then one of the walls of this building, you can't change one without changing the other one, affecting the other one. So it's really important when you go into View that you're going to go through and use a consistent material globally throughout the model. So you don't have to have like base surface, but if this were a train, if you drape this onto the train, then I can select this on the train and add a different material or surface to it. And probably in a later video, we'll deal with landforms and terrain a little bit more. I'll show you how that works. But make sure you break the geometry down for any area that you're going to fill with plants or paving or anything else. And that way, all you have to do is select that material and replace it, and it will make the change in View. Okay, so I'm going to save those couple changes. And then when it comes to exporting it from SketchUp, we can go to the Extensions menu, View Exporter, and choose Export Full Model or Selected. Now, I'm not going to talk about this right now. You can actually go in and edit some of the materials in here. So if you want a certain characteristic to the water, you can change that. One thing I will note that View will take any material that has the term water in it, it will convert it into some type of View water material. So even if it's an image that's, I used it to create a waterfall one time, and as long as it has the term water in it, it will convert it to some type of animated water. But we can always change that later. So I'm not going to get into editing the materials right now since I'm really talking about the geometry in this video. So you can select things. If, let's say, if you had a whole bunch of 3D people you wanted to export for use in View, then you could select each one, do export selected, and basically create a little .vob file, a View object file that we can bring in. And again, that's a subject for another video. But in this case, we're going to use the full model. So instead of choosing that, I'm just going to come up here to the button for the plugin, and I'll just add revised so you can see it. So what we're going to do is just give it a name for the VOB file. And what this will do is actually process through the model, create a folder which will contain the textures and a Python script, which we'll talk about when we get into View. and then this VOB file, which is the file that actually contains the geometry. So when you click this, if you look down here at the bottom left, you'll see it's exporting components. It's running through all this. And when it gets done, it should give you this little audit report that tells you it was complete and where the files are, if you're not sure where they were, where the scene loader is, and kind of a count of what's going on. It took 4.25 seconds to do this. Okay, now before I go to view and bring that in, I'm going to switch over to Rhino and talk about that a little bit, and then we'll end this video. And in the second one, I'll talk about how to bring it into view. So in Rhino, basically the same idea. You create the geometry that you want, and the main thing in here is, again, whether it's grouped or not. I don't think the groups actually come through into view because it looks at these as individual objects, but we can group them in view, as I mentioned, and we can separate them onto layers in view, so that's not really a problem. The key thing is you want to make sure you do two things. And here again, if you click on an object, go to properties, and come over here to where it says name. This is where, just like the info box in SketchUp, you can add a name to materials. Again, it's not essential, but it does help figure out things. This is a very simple model, so it's not too hard to figure out, but if you have hundreds of objects in there, you don't want to scroll through a list with a bunch of numbers in it and try and click on each one until you figure out what you're looking for. So I've just gone through and added building 1, building 2, grass to that surface. And then the other thing you want to do is make sure you add, you can set up layers if you want, again, but they don't come through from Rhino either. So it's really about kind of the properties. And if you click on an object, one of the things that you want to do in here is, again, apply material. And you want to set this to by object. And then if you want to pick, you have your own library somewhere, but you can click on new. I'm going to pick some gravel, click open, and it's applied that. If I come in here and do rendered, you can see that it's got that selected. So if you apply those materials, it just makes them a little easier to distinguish. Otherwise, thing comes through as a default gray. If you use just a display color in Rhino and you see it when it's shaded, that won't come through. You really need to apply some type of material to it. And then we can always adjust these in view, and as we talk about materials, you'll see how to do that. Now, one thing I will mention, I forgot to mention when we were talking about SketchUp, is whatever view you have in the perspective window, that's the way it's going to come in. So if the other one, I left it kind of a bird's eye view a little bit. So I'm going to get this one maybe a little more down to an eye level, just so you can see the difference. So even though in SketchUp, I think the way this plugin used to work, if there was a scene, it would bring it in with that scene as the default view. Now it doesn't. You have to click on that scene, and then if I exported this, it would give me the initial camera setup in view would be exactly this. But because the last view was kind of from a bird's eye view, you'll see that it will come in that way. So anyway, that's the same thing in here. Set up a camera. We can adjust it and set it up, but if you have a couple of view that you want, then if you set it up, then it will come in initially with that. So in Rhino, when you're ready with your geometry, you just simply select everything you want to export, go to File, Export Selected, and in this case, you choose a 3D Studio format. That seems to work the best. And although this says save texture, save, this is kind of if you want to save out individual pieces. You don't have to check any of these. It will save the geometry and the materials at the same time. So we'll call this Export Revised. And this simply just, it doesn't create anything else other than a 3D Studio file that you can use to import into SketchUp or into View. So that's kind of the similarities and differences between going from SketchUp to View versus Rhino to View. So whichever modeler you're more comfortable with, doesn't matter. The geometry comes through very cleanly in both cases. And so the next video we'll go over how we import those, slight difference in how we do that, and then how we can add some other materials, ecosystems, plants, and so forth once we get in there. It's just kind of a quick overview of where we're going to be going in the next few weeks.